We want to take you now to Edmonton. Premier Jim Prentice is taking questions from reporters dealing with the falling price of oil. Let's listen in.
Ladies and gentlemen, we should close the door there, I think, if we want to be able to hear each other. I think Mr. Bennett, I think, was first, Kim, and then.
You've always been clear that there would be no sales tax when you're watching today. You seem open to go to that. What changed?
Oh, I've simply pointed out that the process of preparing the budget, particularly a budget that will straddle a number of years to provide all Albertans with certainty of our finances, will require consultation with Albertans. And so, you know, there are many different points of view on what needs to be done, and I think that it's important that we hear from Albertans. And so I have personal views about it, but I welcome the discussion, and I want to see as much public discussion as possible about how we deal with the challenges that we've been faced. I'm confident about our ability to do this as a province, but I think a public discussion about how to do it is very important.
But even as of a week ago, you were saying that was off the table.
I'm not embracing a sales tax. Let's be clear. I've simply said that you know, I want to hear what Albertans think about cost containment, about deficits, and about you know, revenue increments to the government. And you know, certainly there are people who have views about sales tax, and I welcome their opinions.
So in general, do you think that you need from the public to carry out this discussion and to actually make some of the decisions that you were talking about in your speech?
What sort of a...
What mandate, what kind of endorsement do you think you'll need from the public?
Well, I think, Kim, that remains to be determined, but I think it's a fair question. You know, I think that question can only be answered once we've made some of the decisions that need to be made about how we're going to deal with this. You know, oil prices continue to slip. We don't evidently haven't evidently seen the bottom yet, and this has opened up an enormous revenue shortfall in terms of the Alberta government's budget, quantified for next year as $6 to $7 billion, $5 billion the year after that, $5 billion the year after that if we don't take action. And so, you know, clearly that involves belt tightening on the part of the government, and a series of measures that we're currently working on. It clearly will also, you know, require us to be fiscally responsible in other ways. And so we'll make those decisions. We have a budget committee that's working hard at it. Once we've made the decisions, I think we can better answer the question of taking it to Albertans.
Will these decisions form the basis of a ballot box question?
I think it remains to be determined, but you know, this is the most significant public financial circumstance that we have seen in this province in a generation. And it also has a different origin than low prices we have seen in the past. I mean, this is a low price environment that's going to continue for a period of time. It's not a normal commodity cycle. And so the experts we speak to are telling us don't think of this as happening for a single year, that it will be several years, and it will have implications on the budget of Alberta for probably the current fiscal year and 3 additional years.
So you're saying the best way to consult is an election?
I've heard you say that. I have not said that, but you know, I want to hear from Albertans about how they feel we need to deal with this. Our government is working hard at it. I'm working hard on it as the Premier. I want to hear what they have to say. An election is a possibility. But firstly, we have to develop the fiscal plan. We have to consult with Albertans about what they think is best. And then at the end of the day, we'll assess where we are.
The Conference Board of Canada claims that Alberta is heading into a recession.
Yes, I saw that. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with the Conference Board of Canada. I didn't find their analysis to be particularly cogent, to be frank. And the opinion that they've put forward is an outlier amongst all of the other opinions that have been put forward by every one of Canada's chartered banks and by other respected economic forecasters. If you take the consensus of all of the other forecasts that have been undertaken, there is a slippage in economic growth in Alberta from something in the range of 3.2% down to somewhere between 1.8 and 2.2%, roughly. And so I don't agree with the assessment of the Conference Board that Alberta faces a recession this year, and certainly we intend to make measured, balanced fiscal choices that will continue to keep us in a positive growth mode.
Is there a potential cut on capital funding to the cities?
Well, certainly the capital grants to the cities are part of the expenditure profile of the government. It's part of what we're looking at. We are assessing not only the provincial capital plan, but also the capital grants that are given by the provincial government to the cities, which are close to $4.5 billion per year. It needs to be said that there are grants, commitments that have been given by the provincial government over a number of years that have caused municipal governments in this province to construct public infrastructure. And it was based on promises and commitments from the provincial government. We're mindful of that, and we need to also honor commitments that have been given in the past.
We're going to go to the phones now. Operator, please put through the first caller.
Our first question comes from the line of Rebecca Penty with Bloomberg News. Your line is now open.
Thanks very much, Premier. I was just hoping you could shed some more light. Will you clarify for me, sorry, when you talk about a revenue shortfall, you're not talking about a deficit, are you, when you say $6 billion for the coming fiscal year? And just also wondering if you can confirm the view that we'll have a $500 million deficit this year.
Sure. Fair questions. The point I make is that if we were to do nothing, the revenue shortfall from previous budgets for next year would be $6.275 billion. The revenue shortfall, that's for 2015-2016. The revenue shortfall for 2016-2017 would be $5.5 billion, and the revenue shortfall for the third year I speak of would be $5 billion. I'm not advocating that the province of Alberta run a deficit in that order of magnitude, and so decisions will have to be made. Those decisions consist really of three essential levers that the government has. The first is to constrain and reduce expenditures. The second is to increase revenue. And the third is to accept some level of deficit in the province's finances. And I would underscore that Alberta's finances are underpinned, if I can use that term, by a $5 billion cash contingency, which can be brought to bear in terms of getting us through deficits over the course of those 3 years. You've also asked about the current year, which we are in, 2014-2015, which ends this March. You know, this is something I can't be completely categoric about. The most recent numbers I've seen would indicate that we will probably be in the vicinity of a $500 million deficit on an aggregated basis for this fiscal year. You know, I made the point previously that you know, budgeting in government at this stage of the year with only 2 months left is a bit like landing a 747. You're approaching the runway and there's really not a lot that can be done. We can't in a significant way reduce expenditures any further, and it's very difficult to increase revenues in the short term. And so you know, we will be where we will be. I think the speed with which this has all changed is something that Albertans need to be mindful of. As recently as September and October, the projection was that the province would have approximately a $1.5 billion surplus. We've moved in the space of barely 120 days because of low oil prices into a deficit of about $500 million. Hope is that sufficient clarity?
Thank you very much. That really helps.
When you say a deficit, do you mean that that's money that we will go into debt to pay, or is that money that the contingency fund will cover?
One would presumably, let's assume it's a $500 million deficit, one would presumably draw down on the contingency fund for that amount,
right. And,
leaving $4.5 billion as a buffer for the 3 following years.
Is there any consideration being given to dipping into the Heritage Fund if necessary?
I don't think that's under consideration at this point in time. I think Albertans feel quite strongly about the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. as a vehicle of savings, as something that's important to future generations. And I think that we can deal with the circumstances that we face over the next 3 years within the $5 billion contingency that we have and the other levers that we have at our disposal.
We're going to go to
You mentioned in your speech or in the chat out there about how much civil servants are being paid and how that needs to change. Can you amplify on what you mean by that? Are you talking about future contract negotiations with nurses and teachers?
Well, I'm not, I don't wish to single anyone out. I simply make the point that if you look at the analysis and if you look at the benchmarking, essentially for all public services across the province, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I think it bears scrutiny when you look at the analysis that's been done. There has been cost pressures in Alberta, and it's resulted in wage settlements which are higher than elsewhere in Canada. This is well known in public circles across the country that Alberta wages are higher than elsewhere. I'm not getting into dissecting how we ended up where we are. I simply make the point that we need to work together with our partners, and I see teachers and nurses and doctors and civil servants as partners in dealing with all this. We need to work together in a fiscally constrained environment to address those realities. And it's not realistic to think that we can deal with a $6 to $7 billion hole in the Alberta government's finances without dealing across the board with all elements of our expenditures. And if you take education as an example, I just use it because I'm familiar with the numbers. 77% of the public expenditures on education are direct payments in the form of wages.
Are you looking at rollback?
It's not that different, frankly, with the healthcare system.
We need to go to Don Braid on the phone. Operator, please put through the next caller.
Your next question comes from Don Braid with the Calgary Herald. Your line is now open.
Premier, I just want to ask regarding your language concerning sales tax. A while ago you were saying there would be no sales tax, no provincial sales tax, and today you said you're not saying you're embracing sales tax. Are you drifting toward the kind of opinion that there should be some kind of sales tax increase, or are you now open to it?
No, I'm not drifting at all. It's a fair question. I'm of the view that Albertans do not want a sales tax, but I welcome the view of people in this province who think differently. And so, it's important as we deal with this, the financial circumstances that we're in, that we have a frank and honest discussion amongst people in this province about the solutions. And I don't intend going into that discussion to constrain or curtail or shorten that discussion. I want to hear what people think. It's a problem for all of us. We got into this together. We're only going to get out of it together. And so I want to know what people feel.
What kind of forum do you...
We've been listening in to Alberta Premier Jim Prentice taking questions from reporters this afternoon on an interesting day, especially if you follow oil prices. They are around a 6-year low today, and no province in the country is more impacted by that than Alberta. So here's a bit of what the Premier had to say. Now, he says he doesn't think that we've seen the bottom of oil prices yet. He says it's already led to an enormous shortfall in the budgeting for this year. He says if we don't take action, the Alberta budget is short $500 million based solely on the drop in the price of oil. He calls this, and listen to this wording, the most significant public fiscal circumstance we have seen in this province, Alberta, in a generation. He says the impact of these falling oil prices is going to hit Alberta not just for this year, but for at least 3 years. And he says he is going to be publicly asking Albertans, how do you want to deal with this? He even said possibly that means an election if we have to go to the polls to ask Albertans precisely how they want to deal with this. He does not agree with the Conference Board of Canada, which said earlier today that in its opinion, Alberta will actually fall into recession later this year as a result of the falling oil prices. He does say that this could affect the amount of money that the province of Alberta transfers to the cities, but he made note that those cities have made some big infrastructure investments in the past couple of years with the assumption that they would get a certain amount from the province. So he's aware that if the province cuts that money, it does have a trickle-down effect. He says this about the budgeting, and these are really interesting numbers. He says if we do nothing in Alberta as a reaction to the falling price of oil, here's the real dollar impact. $6.275 billion revenue shortfall in the fiscal year 2015-16, $5.5 billion in the following fiscal year, $5 billion the year after that, that they will have to look to some of their government savings to try to ameliorate these numbers. But he says other important decisions are going to have to be made. And he says the province of Alberta only has 3 options: spend less, bring in more, or agree to go along with a deficit the likes of which Alberta has not seen in some time.